When a man hurled a dessert at his accomplished wife's face in a fine dining establishment because she declined to settle the check, the aftermath left everyone utterly stunned. Aria Sterling glided into the vast atrium, the gentle tap of her stilettos a quiet rhythm on the gleaming obsidian floors. The space was a shimmering galaxy of couture gowns and bespoke tuxedos, where the air itself was a rich tapestry woven from the fragrances of rare orchids, jasmine, and amber. This was the landscape of her life: exclusive galas, philanthropic soirees, and high-stakes networking events. She navigated the throng with an effortless grace, a carefully curated smile, and a subtle nod, her currency, with the familiar faces. Yet just beneath that polished veneer, a persistent, hollow feeling resided, the sensation of being perceived not as herself, but as a symbol, a mere reflection of her family's immense fortune and storied name. Her father, Marcus Sterling, was a titan of finance who had forged a colossal empire from sheer will, while her mother, Eleanor, was a revered art connoisseur with unparalleled influence. Aria had been gifted their incisive intellect and a sharp eye for nuance, but she had also inherited the weight of their legacy. Every professional triumph she secured as a leading investment strategist was quietly branded as a product of nepotism by cynics, while every minor misstep was intensely magnified, a potential blemish on the family's pristine reputation. As she reached for a flute of champagne from a circulating attendant, her gaze was captured by a man positioned across the grand room. He possessed a commanding height, chiseled features, and an aura of confidence that felt refreshingly authentic amidst the sea of practiced cordiality. His eyes locked with hers, and he offered a smile, a genuine, slightly lopsided smile that sent a surprising flutter through her. He didn't carry the air of someone who belonged in this world, and that was precisely what drew her in. "Aria Sterling," he stated with a silken smoothness as he drew near, extending a hand. His voice was a deep, warm current, with an undercurrent of playfulness. "You are impossible to overlook in any room." She tilted her head. A spark of curiosity ignited. "And you are? Julian?" "Julian Croft," he answered, a glint in his eye. "Just a simple architect attempting to disappear into the scenery of a lavish party." Aria's laughter rippled out, the accumulated tension of the evening beginning to dissolve. His relaxed charm was a welcome breeze, a striking departure from the rigid decorum she navigated daily. They spent the remainder of the night lost in conversation, discovering a shared passion for avant-garde art and the intricate beauty of urban design. Julian spoke with an infectious zeal about his work, crafting vibrant community centers and breathing new life into forgotten city districts, and Aria found herself utterly mesmerized by his vision. In the weeks that followed, Julian became an integral part of her world. He wasn't cowed by her achievements or her family status, or so it appeared. He made her laugh, truly laugh, listened to her professional frustrations, and saw her as a person, not a dynasty. It didn't take long for Aria to feel herself falling for him, despite the quiet words of caution from her inner circle. Her dearest friend, Serena, was the most direct. "Ari, he's undeniably charming, but there's something that feels rehearsed. He seems a bit too keen, like he's always auditioning for a part." Aria brushed away the warning. "Not everyone has an angle, Serena. Maybe he genuinely likes me for who I am." Her parents' skepticism was more veiled, but just as present. Over a formal dinner at their estate, her father posed a series of pointed inquiries to Julian about his professional history and aspirations, his tone impeccably polite, yet unmistakably forensic. Julian navigated the questions with apparent ease, but Aria didn't miss the subtle clenching of his jaw. "I'm not here for your father's approval," he'd said to her later, dismissing it with a chuckle. "I'm here for you." Despite the seeds of doubt sown around her, Aria was utterly captivated. Julian proposed less than a year after their first meeting, and she accepted with zero hesitation. The wedding was a magnificent spectacle, staged within the breathtaking gardens of her family's estate. Aria left no stone unturned, orchestrating every detail to perfection. Julian, however, seemed preoccupied with the guest list, pushing to include powerful individuals he asserted could be instrumental to his business expansion. On the exterior, their life seemed a perfect portrait of happiness, but hairline fractures were forming in the foundation, fractures Aria chose to overlook. Throughout the wedding preparations, Julian had challenged her on every decision, from the culinary selections to the table arrangements, accusing her of being domineering whenever she didn't concede to his ideas. It was her mother who first gave voice to the anxiety Aria had been diligently suppressing. "Aria, darling," Eleanor murmured, as they stood together in the bridal suite on the morning of the wedding. "Are you absolutely certain about this? You don't have to proceed if you're having any reservations." Aria shook her head, dismissing her mother's worry. "Mom, it's just pre-wedding jitters. Julian is a wonderful man. He loves me." Her mother sighed, saying no more, her face a mask of unreadable emotion. The ceremony was exquisite, and for a fleeting, beautiful moment, Aria let herself believe in the fantasy. As she stood beside Julian, exchanging vows beneath an arch of fragrant roses, she willed the nagging doubts away. This was her opportunity for true happiness, a partnership founded on love and mutual respect, or so she desperately hoped. As the reception began to wind down and guests started their farewells, Aria saw Julian engaged in an animated discussion with a cluster of men she didn't know. She caught fragments of their dialogue, enough to grasp that he was leveraging their wedding to promote his architectural projects. A knot of unease tightened in her chest, but she told herself it was insignificant. It was just his way of contributing, of showing he could hold his own in her world. That night, as they departed for their honeymoon, Julian clasped her hand tightly, whispering assurances of a future brimming with love and discovery. Aria wanted to believe every word. She wanted to believe she had chosen wisely. But as the jet ascended, leaving the familiar world behind, a small, quiet voice in the recesses of her mind posed a question. Was she flying toward bliss or devastation? Aria silenced the voice, resolute in her commitment to make her marriage succeed. After all, she mused, love required compromise. She had no idea just how much she would be asked to compromise, and the staggering price it would ultimately cost her. The honeymoon commenced in Verona, a city that had always held a cherished place in Aria's heart. Strolling hand in hand along the river Adige, discovering the hidden alleyways of the old city, and savoring decadent Italian cuisine, it all felt like a waking dream. Julian was attentive, doting, and endlessly charismatic. He delighted her with his clumsy attempts to speak Italian and listened with rapt attention as she recounted stories of visiting the city as a child with her parents. For a brief blissful period, Aria embraced the fairy tale. She assured herself that her earlier misgivings were merely the echoes of prenuptial anxiety, magnified by the opinions of others. Julian adored her, and she was unwavering in her resolve to build a successful marriage. But the fissures in their perfect facade began to appear before their luggage was even fully unpacked. On their second evening in Verona, Aria selected a sophisticated black gown and a pair of designer heels her mother had given her. She felt chic, powerful. When Julian saw her, his mouth curved into a smile, yet his words held a subtle, sharp edge. "You look breathtaking," he remarked, his eyes tracing her silhouette. "But don't you think that dress is a bit provocative? It might attract the wrong sort of gaze." Aria's brow furrowed, thrown off balance. "What are you suggesting?" He shrugged, his tone deceptively light. "Nothing, my love. You're stunning. I just don't want anyone to think you're trying to prove a point." It was a tiny remark, seemingly inconsequential, yet it lingered with her all evening. She found herself subconsciously adjusting her dress, wondering if she truly looked ostentatious. Julian, in contrast, was perfectly at ease, sharing jokes with the restaurant staff and placing her dinner order without asking for her preference. By the conclusion of the honeymoon, Aria started to discern a pattern. Julian would offer casual critiques of her decisions, her wardrobe, her makeup, even her manner of speaking with strangers. "You're overly friendly," he commented one afternoon after she had engaged in a pleasant chat with a boutique owner. "Not everyone is worthy of your attention." Initially, she interpreted it as a form of protectiveness, but the regularity of his critiques escalated. They weren't overtly malicious, but they possessed an undercurrent of disapproval that left her feeling perpetually inadequate. When they returned to their lives, reality quickly set in. Aria eagerly immersed herself in her work, thrilled to lead a groundbreaking project that could redefine her firm's strategy on sustainable investing. She shared her vision with Julian over dinner, anticipating his pride in her ambition. Instead, he met her excitement with a careless dismissal. "Sounds taxing," he said, his eyes barely lifting from his phone. "Don't you ever grow weary of all that pressure?" "I mean, you don't really need to work. We're financially secure." The comment stung. Aria's career was integral to her identity. She attempted to articulate this to Julian, but he waved it away, redirecting the conversation to something mundane. It was the first time she felt a real chasm open between them, a void she couldn't seem to cross. Over the following months, Julian's true colors began to emerge more vividly. He began to assume full control of their finances, asserting that it was his duty as her husband. At first, Aria acquiesced, trusting him completely. But then she started noticing small irregularities, unexplained withdrawals from their joint savings, high-end purchases he failed to mention. When she finally questioned him about it, he just laughed. "Relax, Ari. I'm making strategic investments. You'll be thanking me when we see the returns." She wanted to accept his explanation, but a cold unease settled deep within her. The spending continued, and his justifications grew more opaque. "It's for the business," he would say, whenever she sought clarification. "You wouldn't grasp the details." Julian also began to create a wedge between her and her family and friends. He fabricated reasons to avoid family dinners, professing to feel judged. "They've never approved of me," he'd claim, planting seeds of doubt in her mind. "They don't think I'm worthy of you." Aria defended him initially, but she knew deep down that her parents' reservations had merit. Her father had always been courteous but cautious, and her mother's expression would subtly harden whenever Julian discussed money. Still, Aria found herself pulling away from them, unwilling to endure the tension their gatherings created. Her friendships also began to fray. Serena, her best friend, was the first to voice concern. "You've seemed so withdrawn lately," Serena noted one day over coffee. "Is everything all right with Julian?" Aria hesitated, then manufactured a smile. "Everything is perfect. He's just swamped with work, and so am I." Serena's expression showed she wasn't convinced. "Ari, you know I'm always here if you ever need to talk." Aria nodded, but never took her up on the offer. She'd told herself she didn't want to be a burden, but the truth was more complex. She didn't want to verbalize the fact that her perfect life wasn't so perfect after all. At home, Julian's need for control intensified. He began to critique how she dressed, the company she kept, and even her professional conduct in meetings. "You come across as too assertive," he remarked, after she described a successful but tense negotiation with a client. "People don't respond well to that. It makes you seem aggressive." The word struck her like a physical blow. Aggressive. It was a label she had battled her entire career, a stereotype frequently wielded to diminish the achievements of powerful black women. She tried to shrug it off, but it clung to her, chipping away at her self-assurance. As weeks bled into months, Aria began to feel like an intruder in her own existence. She continued to excel professionally, but her achievements felt hollow. At home, she moved with caution, constantly on edge, fearful of saying or doing something that would provoke Julian's disapproval. Her once thriving social life had shrunk to infrequent text messages and brief catch-ups, all was curtailed by Julian's displeasure. The breaking point arrived on a quiet Sunday morning. Aria was sorting through the mail and discovered a statement from a bank account she had never seen before. The balance was perilously low, and the transaction history showed frequent, sizable withdrawals. Julian had been siphoning funds from their joint account into this secret one. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she confronted him, the statement trembling in her hands. Julian made no attempt to deny it. Instead, he deflected the blame onto her. "I'm doing this for our future," he exclaimed, his voice escalating. "You're too sheltered to comprehend how the real world operates. I am protecting us." In that instant, something inside Aria fractured. For too long, she had allowed him to set the terms of their relationship, methodically eroding her autonomy and self-worth. She understood then that the man she had fallen in love with was gone, if he had ever truly existed. But leaving was not going to be simple. Julian had woven himself into every fiber of her life, and she knew he wouldn't release his grip without a fight. Yet a seed of determination had been sown. She didn't know the how or the when, but she knew with absolute certainty she could not continue to live like this. Aria sat at her desk, her gaze fixed on the financial reports before her, but the figures dissolved into a meaningless blur. Her thoughts were adrift, caught in a storm of Julian, their last explosive argument, and the crushing weight of dread that had become a permanent resident in her life. She had always taken pride in her mental fortitude, her capacity to erect a wall between her personal and professional worlds. But recently, that wall had begun to crumble. At home, Julian's conduct had escalated from oppressive to tyrannical. What were once subtle, dismissive remarks had morphed into open, cutting condemnations. He no longer feigned interest in her career, casually attributing her successes to sheer luck or the power of her family's name. Every discussion seemed to inevitably spiral back to his dissatisfaction with her priorities. "You are a wife now," he had declared just the previous night, his words like shards of glass. "Your primary focus should be on this home, on us, not on your job." Aria had attempted to explain that her work was an essential part of her, the very thing that gave her a sense of purpose, but Julian had waved her words away as if they were utterly inconsequential. It was a recurring theme. Her thoughts, her emotions, her needs, they had ceased to register. One evening, as they prepared for dinner, Julian raised the topic of their finances. He had always insisted on managing the household budget, framing it as his spousal duty to oversee their monetary affairs. Aria had initially consented, seeing no harm. She was consumed by her career and trusted Julian to act in their shared best interest. But with time, she started to notice troubling discrepancies. Julian began acquiring major assets without any discussion: a new designer watch, expensive bespoke suits, even a luxury sports car she was unaware of until it materialized in their garage. When she questioned him, he deflected with ambiguous reassurances. "I'm making investments in our future," he would say, his tone laden with condescension. "It's complex. You wouldn't understand." Aria's disquiet intensified as she unearthed more inconsistencies. Bank records revealed substantial withdrawals she could not explain, and her personal savings seemed to be inexplicably shrinking. One afternoon, while sifting through their mail, she stumbled upon a credit card bill under Julian's name with a balance so staggering it made her feel faint. He had exhausted the card's limit on extravagant indulgences, lavish dinners, expensive gifts, and trips in which she had not been included. When she confronted him, Julian's response was immediate and vicious. He accused her of being untrusting, of attempting to emasculate him by questioning his role as the head of the household. His voice rose, each word a carefully aimed dart intended to wound her self-respect. "You truly believe you're superior to me, don't you?" he spat. "You would have none of this if it weren't for your parents' money. You haven't the faintest idea what it means to actually work for a living." Aria was shocked into silence. She had always known Julian possessed a sharp tongue, but this was something else entirely. This was pure venom. She wanted to retaliate, to remind him of her own hard-won accomplishments, but the words were trapped in her throat. Deep down, a small part of her had begun to internalize his poison. The isolation came next. Julian started inventing excuses to avoid her parents, asserting that they treated him with disrespect. He actively discouraged her from attending social functions, labeling them a frivolous waste of time. On the rare occasions she did manage to meet with her friends, he would either sulk beforehand or bombard her with calls, demanding to know her exact time of return. Her best friend Serena was the first to see the change. "Ari, you're not yourself," Serena observed during one of their infrequent coffee meetings. "You used to be so full of life, so self-assured." "What is happening?" Aria forced a smile, deflecting Serena's concern. "It's just work," she lied. "Things have been incredibly stressful." Serena looked unconvinced, but let the matter drop. Nevertheless, her words echoed in Aria's mind, a tiny fissure in the carefully constructed illusion she had built around her marriage. At the office, Aria's professional performance began to deteriorate. She missed critical deadlines, forgot about important client meetings, and found it impossible to concentrate. Her colleagues noticed, but she deflected their inquiries, attributing her struggles to the pressures of her personal life. She felt ensnared, suffocated by the combined weight of Julian's control and her own silence. The definitive turning point occurred one afternoon when Aria came home early from work. She discovered Julian in his study, hunched over his laptop. He was so engrossed in his task that he didn't hear her enter. As she drew closer, she saw his screen, an email thread with a high-end travel agency finalizing arrangements for a trip to the Azure Isles. Her name was nowhere in the correspondence. "Who is the trip for?" she asked, her voice miraculously steady despite the hurricane raging within her. Julian jumped, slamming the laptop shut. His expression shifted in a flash from surprise to fury. "Why are you sneaking around?" he demanded. "You have no right to intrude on my privacy." Aria held her ground. "I have every right to know how you are spending our money." "Our money?" Julian laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Don't delude yourself, Ari. This is my money. I'm the one who has kept us afloat while you've been playing at being a career woman." The words cut more deeply than she could have anticipated. For years, Aria had fought against the stereotype that black women needed to work twice as hard to be taken seriously. To hear Julian so casually dismiss everything she had striven for was a devastating blow. The argument escalated, with Julian accusing her of being ungrateful and defiant. He stormed out of the house, the slam of the door reverberating through the silence. Aria stood alone in the empty hall, her hands shaking, her mind in turmoil. In that moment, she saw with stark clarity how much of herself she had sacrificed. She had permitted Julian to dismantle her confidence, to isolate her from those who loved her, to seize control of every facet of her life. And for what? To maintain a fragile peace? To prove to herself and to the world that her marriage was worth fighting for? That night, Aria lay awake in bed, staring into the darkness. She thought of the woman she had once been, strong, fiercely independent, and unafraid to challenge the world. She thought of her parents, who had instilled in her the importance of self-worth and the courage to never settle for less. She thought of Serena, who had seen past her facade even when Aria herself refused to. By dawn, a seed of resolve had taken root. She didn't know how or when, but she knew one thing with unwavering certainty. She could not continue to live like this. Something had to give, and this time she would be the one taking control. Aria adjusted the smooth fabric of her emerald green gown, stealing one final glance in the mirror. Her reflection gazed back, composed yet fraught with tension. The dress was a masterpiece, a gift from her mother on her last birthday, but tonight it felt less like clothing and more like armor. She was resolved to make this evening a pivot point, an opportunity to either rescue what was left of her marriage or finally face the truth she had been so desperately evading. She had selected one of the city's most prestigious restaurants for their meeting, L'Étoile. It was the kind of establishment that demanded reservations months in advance, with its subdued lighting, flawless service, and a menu that could compete with the art adorning its walls. Aria hoped the sophisticated ambiance might disarm Julian, persuade him to lower his defenses, and allow for a genuinely honest dialogue. When Julian arrived, he was dressed to perfection in a custom-tailored suit Aria didn't recognize, undoubtedly one of his latest acquisitions. He pressed a cool kiss to her cheek, his smile failing to ignite his eyes. Aria couldn't ignore the way his gaze swept over her dress, followed by a barely perceptible smirk. "You look expensive," he commented as he took his seat. Aria managed to smile, choosing to ignore the barb. "Thank you for joining me. I thought it would be nice for us to have a peaceful evening alone." Julian nodded, gesturing to the sommelier, without a glance in her direction. "Of course. We've both been so consumed. It's good to reconnect." As the sommelier approached, Julian ordered a shockingly expensive bottle of wine without even looking at the list. Aria hesitated, then decided to let it slide. She would allow him to direct the evening, at least for now. The conversation began on safe ground. Julian detailed his recent engagements with potential investors, lacing his stories with subtle brags about his influential network. Aria listened with polite attention, but her mind was elsewhere. His tone, the way he framed his achievements, it all felt meticulously rehearsed, as if he were performing for an invisible audience. When the appetizer arrived, Julian shifted his focus to Aria. "So how's work? Still playing the corporate game?" Aria set down her fork, a familiar knot tightening in her stomach. "It's been demanding, but fulfilling. We just launched a new initiative centered on sustainable investments. It's a project I've been deeply passionate about for a long time." Julian shrugged, swirling the wine in his glass. "Sounds admirable, but don't you ever get exhausted by it? The constant stress, the grueling hours. I mean, you don't have to work. We're perfectly fine without it." Aria took a slow, deep breath, forcing herself to remain composed. "My work isn't just about the money, Julian. It's about having a purpose. It's important to me." He leaned back, a faint, knowing smirk on his lips. "Of course it is. You've always been so ambitious. But don't you think it's time to shift your focus to other things, like starting a family? You're not getting any younger, Aria." The words hung in the air between them, sharp and cruel. Aria felt a hot flush creep up her neck, a mixture of fury and humiliation. She scanned his face, searching for a hint of regret, but he looked completely untroubled, as if he had just remarked on the weather. "I wasn't aware that my career and our future were mutually exclusive," she stated, her voice perfectly even and controlled. Julian waved a dismissive hand. "I'm just saying you don't have to prove anything anymore. You've already accomplished more than most people dream of. Perhaps it's time to ease up and enjoy life." Aria opened her mouth to argue, but the waiter appeared at that exact moment, interrupting with their main course. The timing felt almost orchestrated, as if the universe were granting her a moment to regroup. She looked down at her plate, the artfully arranged dish, a mockery of the chaos churning inside her. It was ironic, she thought, how everything on the surface could seem so perfect, while her life was quietly disintegrating. As the meal wore on, Julian held court, regaling her with tales of his latest networking victories and his plans for an imminent business trip. Aria nodded and made appropriate sounds, but she was barely processing his words. Her mind was racing, each second solidifying the dawning realization that their relationship was beyond repair. When the waiter presented the dessert menu, Aria decided it was time to test her growing certainty. She leaned back, meeting Julian's gaze with a quiet resolve. "Why don't you take care of the bill tonight?" she suggested casually. "You've been so generous lately." "It's my turn to let you handle things." Julian froze, his fork suspended in midair. For a fleeting second, his polished mask slipped, revealing a flash of raw annoyance. He recovered quickly, laughing as if she had just told a clever joke. "Ari, come on. You know I don't carry that much cash. Besides, this place was your idea." Aria tilted her head, her voice unwavering. "I thought it would be a nice gesture to treat you. Or are you saying you're unable to?" The question landed in the space between them, heavier than anything else said that evening. Julian's jaw clenched and his eyes narrowed into slits. "What are you trying to prove?" he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "You're really going to create a scene here, in front of all these people?" Aria didn't flinch. "I'm not trying to prove a thing, Julian. I just thought it was fair." Julian's anger detonated. He slammed his fork down on the table, the sharp sound drawing gazes from nearby tables. His face was flushed, his carefully constructed charm replaced by unadulterated rage. "Fair?" he spat. "You want to talk about fair? After everything I've done for you, for this marriage, this is how you repay me? You think you're better than me because of your daddy's money? You're pathetic." The room fell into a hush, every eye now fixed on their table. A wave of mortification washed over Aria, but she refused to crumble under his glare. She held her head high, her voice calm but firm. "This was never about money, Julian. It's about respect. And it's abundantly clear I won't find that with you." Julian's face twisted in fury. Without warning, he seized the dessert plate before him, a delicate chocolate tart, and flung it directly at her. The plate shattered on impact, the dessert exploding across her dress and face. Gasps rippled through the room as diners shrank back in shock. Aria sat for a moment completely still, the remnants of the tart slowly sliding down her cheek. Then, with deliberate grace, she rose to her feet. The humiliation she had felt just moments before was gone, supplanted by a serene and unshakable resolve. She reached for her napkin, wiping her face with methodical precision. "This is over," she said quietly, her voice carrying through the stunned silence. She turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving Julian, the broken plate, and the shattered pieces of their relationship behind her. As she stepped out into the cool night air, a profound sense of clarity washed over her. For the first time in years, she felt truly, utterly free. It was time to take her life back, and she knew exactly how to begin. Aria's heels clicked a sharp staccato against the marble lobby floor of her parents' estate, the sound a stark counterpoint to the roaring silence in her own mind. She gripped her clutch, her designer dress still marred by the chocolate tart Julian had thrown at her. The sting of public humiliation remained, but simmering beneath it was something far more potent: resolve. The grand double doors swung open before she could reach them. Her mother, Eleanor, stood in the entryway, her discerning eyes performing a swift, comprehensive scan of Aria from head to toe. Eleanor's normally composed and elegant features softened with immediate concern as she registered her daughter's state of disarray. "Aria," Eleanor said, her voice laced with worry as she stepped aside. "What on earth happened?" Aria didn't answer right away. She moved past her mother into the magnificent foyer, the familiar comforting scent of lavender and lemon oil enveloping her. For what felt like the first time in an eternity, she allowed herself to unclench, her shoulders slumping with the sheer weight of her exhaustion. Her father, Marcus, materialized at the top of the sweeping staircase, his tie loosened, a book in hand. The sight of Aria halted him mid-step. He descended the stairs with urgency, his typically stern expression melting into one of deep concern. "Aria," he said, his voice a steady, warm anchor. "Are you all right?" Aria drew a shaky breath, her voice quivering as she finally spoke. "No, Dad, I'm not." Eleanor and Marcus shared a knowing glance before gently guiding her into the drawing room. The space was as familiar to Aria as her own skin. The plush velvet armchairs, the soft ambient glow from the fireplace, and the gallery of framed photographs chronicling their family's history. It was a sanctuary of comfort and safety, a world away from the chaos she had just escaped. As Aria recounted the evening's events, her parents listened in absolute silence. She omitted no detail, from Julian's escalating hostility to the final humiliating spectacle at the restaurant. By the time she had finished, her hands were trembling, and hot tears burned at the corners of her eyes. "I don't understand how I let it get this far," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "I kept telling myself it would improve, that if I just tried harder, but I can't do it anymore. I'm done?" Eleanor reached across the coffee table, her steady hand covering Aria's. "You don't have to navigate this by yourself, my love. We are here for you, for whatever you need." Marcus nodded, his jaw set in a line of cold anger. "You have endured far more than anyone ever should. It's time for you to reclaim your life." Their words, simple yet profoundly sincere, felt like a lifeline. For so long, Aria had convinced herself she had to face her struggles in isolation, that admitting she needed help was a sign of weakness. But here, enveloped in the warmth of her family's love, she realized how profoundly mistaken she had been. The next morning, Aria awoke to the sound of songbirds outside her childhood bedroom window. The room was just as she had left it years ago, down to the meticulously arranged bookshelves and the framed photo of her university graduation. She sat up slowly, the events of the previous night rushing back with a painful clarity. Yet, alongside the pain, there was a new, powerful sense of purpose. For too long, she had allowed Julian to control her life, to systematically dismantle her confidence and isolate her from the people who cherished her. That reign ended now. Aria dressed in a simple blouse and trousers she found in her old wardrobe and made her way downstairs. Her parents were waiting for her in the kitchen, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the space. They greeted her with warm smiles, their silent support fortifying her resolve. Over breakfast, Marcus outlined a course of action. "I'm going to put you in touch with our attorney," he said, his tone firm and decisive. "Isabel Thorne. She's handled situations like this before. We will ensure Julian does not get away with any of this. Aria nodded, a wave of gratitude washing over her. I also need to get back to work, she added. I've been unfocused for too long. It's time to get back on track. Eleanor placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Take it one step at a time, darling. You don't have to fix everything in a single day. The rest of the day was a whirlwind of phone calls and legal preparations. Aria contacted the divorce attorney her father had recommended, Isabel Thorne, a sharp, no-nonsense woman with a formidable reputation. They scheduled a meeting for the following morning to strategize her case. That evening, as Aria sat with her parents in the drawing room, a pang of guilt struck her. She thought about the years she had kept them at arm's length, choosing to defend a man who had done nothing but diminish her. I'm sorry, she said suddenly, her voice cracking with emotion, for pushing you away, for not listening when you tried to warn me. Eleanor moved to the sofa beside her, wrapping a supportive arm around her shoulders. You have nothing to apologize for, Aria. You did what you believed was right. What matters is that you're here now. Marcus nodded from his armchair. You have always been strong, Ori, stronger than you give yourself credit for, and now you are finally taking that strength back. Their words buoyed her, infusing her with a sense of determination she hadn't felt in years. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Aria allowed herself to feel a flicker of hope for a different future, one where she was the sole author of her own story. The following morning, Aria arrived at Isabel Thorne's office, a sleek, modern space in the city's legal district. Isabel greeted her with a firm handshake and a reassuring smile. Let's begin, Isabel said, gesturing for Aria to be seated. Tell me everything. As Aria narrated the story of her marriage to Julian, Isabel listened with focused intensity, taking meticulous notes. When she finished, Isabel leaned back, her expression resolute. You have a very strong case, Isabel stated. We will compile all evidence of financial malfeasance, emotional abuse, and any other misconduct. Julian may try to contest this, but I assure you, we will be thoroughly prepared. Aria nodded, relief flooding through her. For the first time since her marriage began to unravel, she felt she had an advocate, someone who believed her and was ready to fight for her. Over the next few days, Aria took small but crucial steps toward reclaiming her life. She reconnected with Serena, who welcomed her back without question, and began reaching out to colleagues she had alienated. At work, she threw herself into her projects, rediscovering the passion that had once been her driving force. But the path forward would not be without its challenges. Julian would not surrender easily, and Aria knew the weeks ahead would be fraught with difficulty. Yet, as she stood in her parents' foyer one evening, watching the city lights begin to sparkle against the twilight, she felt a sense of clarity she hadn't experienced in years. She was no longer just surviving. She was taking back control one deliberate step at a time. And for the first time in a very long time, Aria Sterling felt truly alive. Aria sat at her office desk, her fingertips drumming a restless rhythm on the polished wood. The brilliant sunlight pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows did little to dissolve the knot of tension in her shoulders. The last few weeks had been a dizzying blur of legal consultations, rekindling old friendships, and reasserting her presence at her firm. Despite the forward momentum, the specter of her failed marriage still cast a long shadow. She knew Julian would make a move eventually, and when he did, she needed to be prepared. Her phone vibrated on the desk, jolting her from her reverie. The caller ID sent a chill down her spine. Julian? She stared at the screen, her thumb hovering over the answer button. Finally, drawing a deep, steadying breath, she accepted the call. Aria, Julian's voice was sharp, stripped of its usual manufactured charm. We need to talk. There's nothing left for us to discuss, she replied, her voice even, despite the frantic beating of her heart. Oh, I disagree, he snapped. You can't possibly think you can just walk away from this marriage with everything. You're delusional. Aria's grip on the phone tightened. I am not taking anything that isn't rightfully mine, Julian. You exploited me for years, and that is over. If you have anything further to say, you can direct it to my attorney. I'm not letting some lawyer dictate my life, he growled. Meet me tonight. You owe me that much, Aria hesitated. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to refuse. but a small part of her yearned for this final confrontation, to face him on her own terms. "Fine," she said at last, "but it will be in a public place." They settled on a neutral location, a busy cafe in the heart of the city. Aria arrived early, selecting a table by the window with a clear view of the street. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she waited, but she centered herself, reminding herself of how far she had already come. When Julian walked in, he looked every bit the polished executive, but his eyes held a glint of raw anger. He sat opposite her, lacing his fingers together on the table as if to restrain himself. "This isn't how things were supposed to end," he began, his tone deceptively mild. "We were supposed to be a team." "A team?" Aria echoed, incredulous. "You spent our entire marriage systematically tearing me down, isolating me, and stealing from me." "That isn't a team, Julian. That's a dictatorship." His jaw tensed. "I did what was necessary to keep us secure. You've had everything handed to you on a silver platter, Aria. I had to fight for everything I have." "And you believe that justifies your actions?" she retorted. "You used me, Julian. You used my money, my connections, my reputation, and it was never enough for you." Julian's composure finally shattered, his voice rising. "You're the delusional one. I built a life for us while you were off playing corporate hero. You are nothing without me." Aria's hands trembled beneath the table, but she refused to let him see her unease. She met his furious gaze, her voice steady and clear. "You're wrong, Julian. I was someone long before I met you, and I will continue to be someone long after you're gone. You do not define me." Julian's face darkened, and for a terrifying moment she thought he might become violent. Instead, he leaned back, a bitter smile twisting his lips. "You will regret this, Aria. You think you're untouchable, but you're not. I will ruin you." "Do your worst," she said, rising to her feet. "I am done being afraid of you." Without another word, Aria turned and walked out of the cafe, her heart pounding. She knew Julian wouldn't capitulate easily, but for the first time, she felt truly ready to face whatever he threw at her. That evening, Aria sat in Isabel Thorne's office, recounting the tense confrontation. Isabel listened intently, her sharp gaze narrowing as Aria detailed Julian's threats. "We need to document this immediately," Isabel said, making swift notes in her planner. "Every conversation, every incident. If he attempts anything, we will be prepared." Aria nodded, grateful for Isabel's steadfast support. Over the past weeks, the attorney had become her anchor, expertly navigating her through the treacherous legal waters. "Do you think he'll act on his threats?" Aria asked, her voice softer now. Isabel looked up, her expression serious. "Men like Julian don't handle a loss of control gracefully. He will likely try to intimidate you, perhaps even twist the narrative to cast himself as the victim. But we have the truth on our side, and we will use it." Aria left the office with a renewed sense of resolve. She was not the same woman who had silently endured years of Julian's abuse. She was stronger now, more determined, and she would not allow him to dictate the course of her life any longer. The days that followed were tense. Julian initiated a smear campaign, spreading malicious rumors about Aria among their mutual acquaintances. He painted a picture of a selfish, ungrateful wife who had abandoned him. Aria heard the whispers, saw the questioning glances in meetings and at events. It hurt, but she refused to let it break her. Instead, she poured her energy into her work and leaned on the people who truly mattered. Serena became a constant source of support, her unwavering loyalty a comforting presence. Her parents stood by her, their home a sanctuary from the mounting stress. One afternoon, Aria received an email from Isabel. Attached was a comprehensive file detailing Julian's financial malfeasance, bank statements and documents tracing the money he had siphoned from their joint accounts to finance his own ventures. Isabel had also unearthed correspondence revealing his manipulation of their friends and colleagues. Aria stared at the file, a mix of anger and validation washing over her. This was the concrete proof she needed, not just for the legal proceedings, but for her own peace of mind. It affirmed everything she had suffered, every time she had questioned her own sanity. As the legal case against Julian solidified, Aria felt a profound internal shift. She was no longer a victim, no longer the woman who had silently weathered years of emotional torment. She was reclaiming her story, her power, her life. The final showdown with Julian was on the horizon, but Aria knew she was ready. She had her family, her friends, her legal team, and, most importantly, she had herself. For the first time in years, she felt like the woman she was always meant to be, strong, confident, and utterly unafraid. The courthouse stood as an imposing structure of stone and glass, its formidable facade a testament to justice and closure. Aria paused at the entrance, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. She had dedicated the past few weeks to this moment, meticulously gathering evidence, reliving years of manipulation, and steeling herself for the battle ahead. Today signaled the beginning of the final act, the divorce hearing. Her parents stood on either side of her, their presence a grounding force. Eleanor reached for her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "You've got this, Ari. Stay strong." Marcus nodded, his stern features softening as he met his daughter's gaze. "This is the end of his game. You already won the most important victory by taking back your life." Aria nodded, drawing fortitude from their support. She took a deep centering breath and walked through the heavy doors, the click of her heels echoing on the polished stone. Isabel Thorne was waiting inside, a beacon of calm in the storm. "Aria," Isabel greeted her, her tone professional yet imbued with warmth. "Are you ready?" "Yes," Aria replied, her voice firm despite the storm in her stomach. "I'm ready." As they entered the courtroom, Aria's eyes immediately found Julian at the defendant's table. He was impeccably dressed, as always, but a palpable tension radiated from his posture, a flicker of apprehension in his eyes. For a fleeting instant, their gazes locked, and Aria saw a phantom of the man who had once charmed her completely. But that image dissolved, replaced by the stark reality of the man he had become, or perhaps the man he had been all along. The proceedings commenced with opening statements, each side meticulously laying out their case. Isabel spoke with sharp precision and unwavering confidence, presenting a mountain of evidence detailing Julian's financial misconduct, emotional abuse, and calculated manipulation. Aria watched as her lawyer methodically dismantled the facade Julian had so carefully constructed. When it was Julian's turn, he cast himself as the aggrieved party. He claimed Aria had neglected their marriage, prioritizing her career above their relationship and cruelly abandoning him without cause. His voice was calm, almost pleading, as he wove his fictional tale. A surge of anger rose in Aria, but she maintained her composure. She knew this was his final, desperate attempt to control the narrative, but she also knew the truth was an unshakable fortress on her side. When her turn to testify came, Aria took a deep breath and walked to the witness stand. She recounted the years of subtle digs, the engineered isolation from her loved ones, the financial deception, and the final violent confrontation at the restaurant. Her voice remained steady, even as she described the moments that had made her feel infinitesimally small. "I stayed because I believed things could get better," she said, her voice firm, laced with the memory of pain. "I thought if I just worked harder, if I gave more of myself, I could save our marriage. But I finally realized that no amount of effort can change a person who does not want to change. I deserve better, and today I am taking the first step toward building the life I deserve." The courtroom was utterly silent as Aria concluded. Even Julian, who had spent most of the hearing scribbling notes or glaring at Isabel, seemed momentarily stunned. The judge adjourned the proceedings, announcing a verdict would be delivered the following week. As Aria left the courtroom, a strange sense of peace settled over her. The outcome was now out of her hands, but she knew she had done everything in her power. For the first time in years, she felt truly at peace. The week passed in a haze. Aria immersed herself in her work, finding solace in the projects that had once brought her joy. She spent her evenings with her parents, enjoying simple meals and rediscovering the warmth of their unconditional love. Serena became a constant presence once again, their conversations flowing with the easy laughter of their long friendship. When the day of the ruling dawned, Aria returned to the courthouse with Isabel and her parents by her side. The judge's decision was swift and unequivocal. Aria would retain full ownership of all her assets, including her family's business interests. Julian's claims were summarily dismissed, and he was ordered to repay a significant portion of the funds he had misappropriated. The verdict hit Aria like a tidal wave. Relief, vindication, and a profound sense of closure washed over her as the judge's words echoed in the silent room. She had won, not just the legal battle, but her freedom. Outside the courthouse, the sun was brilliant, a stark contrast to the storm that had shadowed her life for so long. Her parents embraced her, their pride shining in their smiles. "You did it," Eleanor said, tears glistening in her eyes. "You took your life back." Marcus nodded, his hand resting on her shoulder. "This is just the beginning, Ari. You have your whole future ahead of you." Aria smiled, her chest swelling with hope. For the first time in years, the horizon felt boundless, filled with infinite possibility. In the weeks that followed, Aria began to rebuild her life, piece by piece. She reconnected with colleagues she had drifted from, fortifying both her professional and personal networks. At work, she spearheaded a new initiative to mentor young professionals from underrepresented communities, transforming her experiences into something positive and meaningful. She also launched a foundation dedicated to supporting women who had survived emotional and financial abuse. The foundation quickly gained momentum, with Aria sharing her story in interviews and at speaking events. Her raw vulnerability and unwavering resilience struck a chord with others, inspiring them to discover their own strength. Through it all, Aria never forgot the journey that had led her to this place. The pain, the betrayal, the moments of self-doubt, they had shaped her, but they no longer defined her. She was no longer the woman who had dimmed her own light to allow someone else to shine. She was stronger, wiser, and unapologetically herself. One evening, as Aria sat on the balcony of her apartment, gazing out at the city skyline, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The past was behind her, and the future stretched out before her like an uncharted, exciting map. She raised a glass of wine to the night sky, a quiet toast to her journey. She had weathered the storm and emerged more powerful. Now it was time to embrace the life she was always meant to live. Aria leaned against the cool metal railing of her balcony, the evening breeze a soft caress against her skin. The city sprawled before her, a dazzling tapestry of light and energy that pulsed with life and promise. For years she had felt confined, suffocated by the weight of a toxic marriage and the burden of expectation. Now she stood on the precipice of a new beginning, her life finally, unequivocally, her own. The foundation she had established was flourishing. Emails flooded her inbox daily from women sharing their own stories, seeking guidance, and expressing profound gratitude for the resources her team provided. Each message served as a powerful reminder of why she had chosen this path. Her personal pain, once a source of shame, had been transmuted into a beacon of hope for countless others. Tonight she was hosting an event at the Meridian Terrace to celebrate the Foundation's remarkable success. Her parents, Serena, and her most ardent supporters would be in attendance, alongside many of the women whose lives had been transformed by the Foundation's programs. Aria intended for the evening to be more than a simple celebration. It was a testament to her resilience, a moment to honor the indomitable strength of every woman who had reclaimed her own life. The Meridian Terrace was a breathtaking rooftop venue, lush with cascading greenery and illuminated by a canopy of twinkling lights. Guests arrived in elegant evening wear, the soft murmur of conversation mingling with the smooth melodic strains of a jazz quartet. Aria moved through the crowd, greeting each person with a genuine smile, her newfound confidence a radiant aura around her. She felt a light tap on her shoulder and turned to find Serena grinning at her, a flute of champagne in hand. "You've truly outdone yourself, Ari," Serena said, her eyes sweeping over the beautifully appointed space. "This is absolutely incredible." Aria laughed, her glass clinking against Serena's. "It's not just my doing. Everyone here contributed. This foundation wouldn't be possible without the support of people like you." Serena's expression softened. "You know, it's just amazing to see you like this, so strong, so happy, so free." I've really missed this version of you." Aria smiled, the words resonating deep within her. For so long she had felt like a mere shadow of herself, but now she was rediscovering the vibrant woman she had always been. "I've missed her too," she admitted. The evening unfolded with a flawless grace. Guests mingled, shared stories, and forged new connections. At one point, Aria took the stage, her voice clear and steady, as she thanked everyone for their support and spoke passionately about the Foundation's mission. She shared fragments of her own journey, her vulnerability, creating a powerful connection with everyone in the room. By the time she finished, the applause was thunderous. As the night began to wind down, Aria found herself on the terrace, gazing out at the glittering skyline. She heard quiet footsteps and turned to see her mother approaching, a gentle smile on her lips. "You were magnificent tonight," Eleanor said, standing beside her. "Your father and I could not be prouder." Aria felt a lump form in her throat. "Thank you, Mom, for everything. For standing by me, even when I made it difficult." Eleanor took her hand, her grip firm and loving. "You have always been strong, Aria, even when you couldn't see it yourself. Watching you reclaim your life has been one of the greatest joys of mine." Aria nodded, tears threatening to spill. "I couldn't have done it without you and Dad. I felt so lost for so long, but you never once gave up on me." Eleanor smiled, her eyes shining with love. "That's what family is for. And now you are building a new kind of family, a community of women who see their own strength reflected in yours. That is something truly special." Aria leaned her head against her mother's shoulder, the two of them looking out at the city in a comfortable, profound silence. The days that followed were filled with purpose and activity. Aria's foundation continued to expand its reach, and her career blossomed as she embraced new challenges with a renewed vigor. She began to travel, exploring the cultures and cuisines she had always dreamed of. Each journey brought fresh inspiration, new ideas for her foundation, and a deeper appreciation for her own resilience. In Morocco, she was mesmerized by the vibrant souks and shared meals with local women who spoke of their own triumphs and struggles. In Japan, she immersed herself in the art of quiet contemplation, finding a deep sense of peace in the tranquil gardens and ancient tea ceremonies. Every trip was another step on her path to healing, a celebration of the life she was courageously reclaiming. Back home, Aria's apartment transformed into a sanctuary of warmth and creativity. Its walls were adorned with photographs and mementos from her travels, each a tangible reminder of the path she had walked. The woman who looked back at her from the mirror each morning was no longer haunted by self-doubt. She was strong, confident, and unapologetically herself. One evening, as Aria sat at her desk reviewing proposals for the Foundation's next project, she received an email from Serena. The subject line read, "Look at you." Curious, Aria opened it and found a link to a news article. The headline proclaimed, "From Survivor to Leader, Aria Sterling on Rebuilding a Life of Strength and Purpose." The article detailed Aria's journey, her tireless work with the Foundation, and her unwavering commitment to empowering women. As she read, a swell of pride washed over her, not for the public recognition, but for the tangible impact she was making. Her story was no longer a source of pain, it was a source of hope. That night, Aria stepped onto her balcony, a glass of wine in her hand. The city lights twinkled like 1,000 tiny promises, each one a testament to the endless possibilities that lay ahead. She thought about the woman she had been when she first met Julian, bright-eyed and hopeful, yet so uncertain of her own worth. She thought about the years she had spent dimming her own light to let someone else shine. And she thought about the woman she was now, strong, independent, and unafraid to take up space in the world. Aria raised her glass to the skyline, a quiet toast to the journey that had brought her here. "To new beginnings," she whispered, her voice steady and sure. As she sipped her wine, a profound sense of peace settled over her. The scars of her past would always be a part of her story, but they no longer defined her. She was free to live, to love, to dream, and she was just getting started. Thank you for finishing this video. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on new stories and inspirational content. If you enjoyed this video, share it with your friends. Maybe it will be an encouragement to someone else. Also, check out our other videos for even more great stuff. See you soon.